All right, who are we? Front Range Business Brokers. I've been around since '86. About 14 so folks on the team right now. I myself am actually a product of Front Range. I bought my first business through Front Range 10 years ago when I was 27 by a mentor of mine. He was a broker here, and then eventually he converted me. Bunch of guys here on the Front Range. We do stuff in Intermountain as well. If I could summarize our team and the things I appreciate about us and what I think sets us apart is we're good at relationship. I feel like relationship is a priority for everyone here. I know brokers who have relationships with folks who bought and sold businesses years after the transactions actually happened. We do team collaboration. I'm always bouncing off ideas off of folks. Folks are bouncing ideas off of me. We're talking about the same deals. We each bring different experiences, so we work together to get the best value for everybody and give them the best experience. And then lastly, I think just professionalism and integrity is kind of what sets us apart. I know everybody who works with us tries to get people very fair prices, tries to treat people, both buyers and sellers, very fairly, and has great relationships with lenders, lawyers, and the like. A little bit more about me. My name is Justin Wells. I was born and raised in Colorado. I currently live in Fort Collins. Been up here for, 19 years now. Came up for college, never left. Was born in Lakewood, Colorado. Met my wife 10 years ago. We have been married 6 years. I met her on a dance floor. The rest was magic. We have a 10-year-old adopted son. He's my guy. He loves snake hunting. Your questions, yes, we did get one of those snakes inside by accident. And the answer is also no, we never found that snake once it was lost. Maybe it's still in here, we don't know. Hopefully not. Professionally, I have owned, operated, started 5 businesses across different industries over the last 10 years. That's across travel, it's across hospitality, restaurant, manufacturing, etc. 2 of those businesses I actually purchased through Front Range. And during that time, I've managed over 100 different employees. All right, oops, here we go. So why this presentation? Why this webinar? Why are we talking about this? Well, I would argue that we are in an era where generational understanding is key, and it's going to be key in how we do business transactions for about the next 5 to 10 years. I'll set the stage real quick for that. We are in a very quickly advancing society, as everyone knows. For the last century, things have progressed technologically, culturally, very, very fast. Because of that, we have ended up with 5 very different generations that have very different life experiences. We have a couple generations that grew up with the advent of color TV, and then another generation that didn't know what it was like to not have internet. And as you can imagine, that shapes life experience and expectations drastically. And in that, we're going to have lots of miscommunication, lots of misunderstanding. And to be able to smooth that out and understand each other is going to create a lot of value for everybody. In the midst of all this complexity, we have the boomer retirement, or is what many call the silver tsunami, right? We are the baby boomer generation is the largest generation in world history, period. And with them retiring, that is also creating the largest wealth transition in human history, period. And a lot of that value, for better or worse, is locked up in the businesses that this generation has created over many, many years. Of all of, as you can see here on our chart, of all of the businesses out there and their value, boomer businesses make up 13 trillion estimated worth in value. And that's coming from about 14% of the workforce. Boomers make up 14%, yet they own about 40% of all businesses currently. So what's my bottom line? Why are we here? My bad, guys. Here we go. Baby boomers, they want to cash out. They want to be able to take these things that they have built for years and years and years and go ahead and cash out and have that money and either give it to the next generation, put it into retirement, use it for the things they want to do after they have worked so hard for all these years. Younger generations, kind of in an interesting place. Not exactly sure if all of the tools we have for retirement are still going to be there or if they'll be as robust as they are now. A lot of questions around that. So younger generations are looking to be like, what is my retirement plan going to be? What am I going to do to build wealth in this new era? At the end of the day, generational understanding is going to help us maximize that value and maximize our time, because our time is very valuable, and all this time and effort we put into things, we want it to show for something. All right, how are we going to do that? Pretty easy in this particular webinar. We're going to break it down into two perspectives. First perspective is the seller. How do I make my business more attractive to different generations? And then we'll go to the buyer perspective. A second here, admitting somebody. And then perspective 2 from the buyer. How do I become an appealing buyer to sellers that are generationally different from me? But our goal all over through this entire stream is going to be successful succession in a generationally complex era. All right, and here's a little bit more of a backed out idea of our agenda today. We're going to add generational breakdown. I'm going to go through labels, kind of just the general cultural expectations and understandings of each generation as we know it. We'll do the seller perspective, we'll do the buyer perspective, and then at the end, we're actually going to do some workforce considerations, since staff and employees play a big role in how some of these businesses are transferred and how smoothly that process goes. Then we'll have a little bit of story time. I'll share one particular story I feel fits this webinar pretty well, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So try to save your questions for then. If there's other things that come up or you really want to get in the moment, there's some other folks on here that will flag me if we feel like a particular important question has come up that we should address in the moment. All right, defining generations. Let's start with 4. You'll notice that we are missing the silent generation on here. They only make up 2% of the workforce and aren't super heavy in what we're going to talk about today. The youngest silent generation is 80 years old. So how they or what they are doing in the workforce, I don't know, but it's impressive. I'd like to know that. I actually don't know that particular statistic. But we'll start with baby boomers. The kind of the main star of our show today, what we'll talk a lot about. Baby boomers, if you're on this, you guys, the youngest of you is going to be 79. Earliest of you were born in 1946. Gen X, the youngest of you were born in 66. Millennials, for you on this, the youngest of you were born in 1982. And for Gen Z, you guys were 98. You barely even saw the 90s. A lot of great things that decade. All right, this personally named the generational values matrix. I did make that up, and it does sound nice. This is going to give you a very brief overview. I'm going to go ahead and summarize real quick, so don't feel like you have to read all these. I've got little blurbs that I'm going to go ahead and toss out there. But this is a basic overview of premium values, especially within the workplace, that are going to give us an idea and set the groundwork for the rest of the webinar here. So boomers are defined by a strong work ethic, a lot of loyalty to employers and their jobs. They're lifers. They'll stay in their jobs. They have stayed in their jobs their entire lives. Very little career changeover. They focus on long-term goals like retirement, home ownership. They prefer formal communication things, sit-down conversations, phone calls at best. And while they aren't digital natives, or why like technology hasn't been, at least as we mostly use it now, hasn't been always a part of their lives, they've adapted a lot. But what I think that they really bring is their stability and their experience and a real sense of duty. And if anything, and above all else, as at least data shows, is legacy. This idea that I'm going to set up something really awesome for the next generation, for me and mine, and going forward, and I will work hard to get there. Gen X, they're kind of the bridge gappers. They value independence, practical problem solving, and they're kind of the first generation to really bring up this idea of work-life balance. Boomers, not so much. Boomers were like, I'm gonna work all the time. I live to work. This kind of the mentality. Gen X saw that, they're like, we're gonna change that a little bit. They grew up adapting to both analog and digital worlds, so they can bridge that gap a little bit better for all of us. They also seem a little bit less in the culture war we seem to have, which is, maybe not more than some, sassy articles or memes that we look up online, but they tend to be like, whoa, boomers, millennials, Gen Z, everyone just chill out a little bit. But they're loyal, they're pragmatic, and they're driven by security and autonomy. Millennials, very different. And I think they're the first generation that started getting heat. And I don't say that just because I am one, but because it feels like those were the first things that kind of hit headlines. Millennials seek purpose. They seek a lot of feedback, personal growth in their careers. They seek a lot of like, hey, they got a lot of the messages of just believe in yourself and you can do whatever you want. And a lot of places that, not many people can outrun the folks who feel like they have purpose and mission. And I've seen a lot of millennials take that and go really far with it. They are going to prioritize the work-life balance. That trend has continued to grow. Communication is less formal. They tend to prefer things like text or even through applications like Slack. They're motivated by experiences and fulfillment over traditional milestones like even things like getting a house, roasted. Gen Z prefers real-time async communication, videos, and direct messages, things that are just constantly immediate. They're going to be the people who FaceTime you. I personally, as a millennial, I'm like, I'll do the FaceTime. I don't love it. But that's most of the folks who are younger than me, they're FaceTiming me more than they're calling me or they're texting me. Calls are pretty much non-existent with anyone who feels younger than myself. Feedback is also expected really quickly, and tech at this point for all of them is their second language. They grew up with it, they're native. They bring creativity, inclusivity, and a sense of identity to any workplace. All right, that's kind of the flyby here. Let's go to having all of our give our strengths, since that's why we're here, talk about strengths and why they help us understand and create better value for our business transactions. So baby boomers, they've been the backbone of our economic life. They've created a lot of the small businesses that we live and breathe right now. Traditionally, they stay in the career their whole life because they're loyal. They have tons of experience, they have long-standing relationships, and they have consistency. They know the industry in and out because they stayed in it. They weren't switching jobs to get higher income. They stayed there because that's what you do to make a living. And they're dependable. I would say that those really encompass what the baby boomers are about, is this dependability and this loyalty and this hardworking ethic. Generation X, they bridge the gap. It's kind of experience meets modernity and practicality. They get to take the best of both worlds, bring them together, and they're very practical, kind of heads down, let's get it done. And also, I understand that I have a wife and kids and a family at home, and I'm going to be there too. So great things about Gen X there. Millennials, they're the creatives, innovation focused. Give them purpose and mission, and they will outrun you. Believe in yourself, that you can be anything you want to be. That really did, and while they got heat for it in other ways, it really has provoked this new way of thinking about how do we do business. What is a more ethical way that we can do things in business? What's a more efficient way we can do things in business, and just in culture in general. And then Gen Z, their strengths. If millennials are tech fluent, then tech for them is their native language. They don't know a world where tech did not exist, so they can interact with it super easily, and it just is going to imbue them, especially with the advent of AI and where that's going to go in business. They're going to be the ones paving the way. And that end, they're kind of being dubbed the what you would call the tool belt. I don't know if you guys have heard this term, the tool belt generation, which is not what they were given credit for, especially during COVID. And I have some really interesting stats on them later about how entrepreneurial they're proving to be. But they are going to be the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. They're going to be the folks who are trying to find new and different ways to create wealth and income early, since all of these future potential modes of retirement are in question or a little shaky, and we're not sure where that direction is going to go in some instances. All right, there's our strengths. All right, couple disclaimers. And first, if you don't get this pop culture reference that I have in front of us, then the generational gaps really are further than I was hoping they were. But here's my disclaimers. First rule of generational labels is that you do not talk about generational labels. I wouldn't go in after this webinar and go to your businesses or go to a future buyer or future seller and say, hey, boomer, and start putting people in these categories and labeling folks. It's going to create more division than it is going to create unity. I feel like that's pretty obvious, but I think it's worth saying these generational labels, they're not gospel, they're tools, they're generalizations to kind of help us think about a very complex topic. So take what you hear today and just kind of apply it loosely. Use it in your own understanding and to help you create value, save yourself time, and hopefully help you understand your peers. There's one other thing about it is that you're going to read a lot of other articles on different generations here. It's really clickbaity, right? There's not a lot of data that's made in a lot of the articles that are posted now. A lot of the stuff that I know about and have done research on, it's all based on professional polls and academic-based data. But because it's so clickbaity, places like Pew Research, they're not even using those terms anymore because they're like, because so many people make this look bad and people aren't using actual information. They're just using generalizations. And so again, main disclaimer here is hold it loosely as we move forward. All right. First perspective, the seller perspective. All right, so first, some statistics. 64% of a buyer of your business, if you are the seller, of being a millennial or Gen X, 64% chance. Millennial business owners have increased 27% in the last year. 62% of millennials consider themselves more entrepreneurial than other generations. 60% of Gen Z intends to be their own boss by age 30, as opposed to 25% of boomers before age 30, which I thought was really interesting. Just because I personally associated baby boomers with this very robust entrepreneurial group. But to know that even before age 30, not many of them thought of themselves as entrepreneurs, and yet we have Gen Z who's coming in before the age of 30 saying, this is what my life will be. A study in the UK actually found that 63% of Gen Z had already engaged in side hustles or small business ventures. I don't know if any of y'all go on YouTube very often, but it is littered with side hustle content. So many people like today's side hustle, get your Etsy shop, etc. It's littered everywhere. It is heavily in the zeitgeist of the younger generations. All right, more stats. 49% of Gen X now see business ownership as a key to satisfactory retirement. Again, as opposed to 25% in boomers. Again, we're talking about that lack of security or lack of knowing what's going to happen to things like Social Security or other retirement tools. 76% of Gen Z and millennials anticipate needing to work during retirement due to insufficient Social Security benefits, point in case. Baby boomers hold 50% of wealth in the US, while millennials only hold 5%. Not super surprising there in the sense of you have to imagine that most folks who have been around longer and had time to make more money are just going to have more wealth than younger generations, but still a pretty significant gap there. And then also currently 95% of all business acquisitions are financed. A lot of people don't know that. Pretty much every deal that comes through Front Range is going to be financed in some way, shape, or form. You see it all of the time. All right. So what can we surmise from all of the data that we have here? that's coming out about businesses and generations alike. And trust me, there was a lot more on this than I have posted here. Those were just the key points I felt like were good punches. So market will be competitive. They will most likely be younger. A lot of these buyers are economic and purpose-driven, especially the younger two are going to be purpose-driven. They're going to want to know, hey, how are you treating your employees? Hey, are you doing things with ecologically friendly practices? Are your vendors well treated? Are you using materials that are biodegradable? Things like that are going to be really important, especially the younger generation that you get. They are most likely going to be the owner operator of your business. That's not necessarily a surprise, but when you hear that, there's things like venture capital coming out or strategic buyers that have a lot more systems in place. There is a statistic out there that says that 40 to 50% of Main Street businesses, meaning businesses that are under 5 million, are being bought by single owners. So this is still true. So when you're selling to someone, picturing them in your place is going to be the reality. They will likely value a work-life balance, meaning, as we talked before, baby boomers, especially if you're a baby boomer, you probably spent a lot of time in your business. You could be, going on 30, 40 years now of having worked 60, 70 plus hours a week. The folks coming in to buy your business, these younger generations, they're going to be like, I don't know if I want to buy a business that's someone's working 60, 70 hours a week on. I want to have more of an understanding of what my home life is going to be. I'm looking for something less than that. Now, I say that with a caveat in that I feel like there's probably some unfair expectations. We do get a lot of folks that come in saying like, hey, I want to run and gun this. I want to come in, work just a little bit, and it's going to print me money. There are some bad expectations around that. We do run into that. But that being said, the trend is working less. They will also value things like mission and ethics. We talked about that early, the biodegradable goods, the ethics and value within your business, the transparency in which you do leadership, etc. It is important to know that pretty much all businesses are going to be found online. If you are planning to sell your business and you're wondering, should I put it online? The answer is absolutely yes. I'd say about, what was it? It was a statistic of last year. This one was just I heard, so don't quote me on this one necessarily, but it was somewhere around 80% of all businesses being sold were being sold online, were found online. So take that for what you will. Your younger generations, regardless of the truth of that statistic, are younger. And the first place they're going to go is to the online platforms like BizBuySell, LoopNet, etc. The other thing is they're underfunded. That's probably just a generality amongst younger folks in general. They just haven't had as much time to build wealth. And you're having to compete with folks wanting to buy homes that are also really high in value right now, causing a large money drain. And so folks are just going to probably come a little bit more strapped, and to be prepared for that. And so they, for our last point, will likely be seeking financing. All right, so let's talk about strategies and leverages here. With all of the stuff we just broke down, let's investigate what are some strategies that and from what I've heard today, a lot of the folks on here are sellers. So this is a time to queue in, and we can answer more of these in the Q&A if you have questions about any of the main points here. You're going to hear me talk on and off about this manufacturing business that I've sold within the last year. I was really close to the deal. I was involved in it, and it just has a lot of great points for this. I'll really dive into it during story time, but just stay with me because it has a ton of great examples. All right, so first one, market online. Sorry, excuse me. 83% of businesses are being sought online right now. And the other 17%, in my guess, are probably don't have the internet, or they actually know someone who's selling. So you need to get your business online. Minimize your hours. As I kind of mentioned before, a lot of folks who are coming in, they don't want to work 60, 70-hour weeks. They want to know they can come in here and have some sort of balance. They want to know that when they're filling your position, they want to know, hey, am I working just a regular 40 hours a week? Am I going to be able to go home? Am I going to be able to do the things that I enjoy outside of business, which I will come in and work very hard for in the same. So again, don't be overwhelmed by that. There are ways to really shrink down the amount of hours by creating systems, et cetera. This is a great point to hop in with a broker who can suggest some of these things. Sitting with a business advisor, there are ways that you can shrink the hours of what you're doing. It will take work, but it will make your business more valuable, profitable. Be able to paint a picture, vision and lifestyle. Folks who come in want to know, what is my life going to look like? What am I going to be doing? Am I going to be, in an attic? And in some places that's fine. Am I doing radon mitigation? Am I going to be under a house for 20 hours a day? What do I have to consider in that? Paint a picture of all the things that you love and are exciting about your business. What are the things that you do? What kept you in it all these years? Be able to paint that picture, because I think it's going to be able to help you sell better. Know your opportunities. If you guys have not done a SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you basically make a quadrant of all of those, and then write your strengths, write your weaknesses, write your opportunities, write your threats. Map that out so that you know and you can communicate them. Say like, hey, if you buy this business, we haven't even tapped into fair. Say you make retail jewelry or something like that. You're like, hey, we haven't even touched online marketing. We haven't touched Instagram. We haven't done this. Try to think about where there are opportunities that you, after many, many years of running this business, haven't been able to tap into. That maybe someone, even who is more tech savvy than you, is going to be able to come in there and grow. Because they want to know they have a future. They want to know that this thing can get bigger than they're getting it for. You want clearly structured roles. The business, the little manufacturing business that I talked about earlier, right now, post-sale is kind of going through a little bit of a mess, because all of the employees there were just to cover the owner's bases, and the owner did a very good job, but none of them have job roles. They're just all kind of cross-trained, kind of all muddled together, and no one knows exactly what they're supposed to do at any given moment. But they all know how to do everything, but when things aren't busy or fast, they're just kind of sitting around. And so no one knows how to help the business grow, because everyone's like, well, these things are done. I don't know what my job is outside this. If you create structure and clearly defined roles and systems in your biz, someone's going to be able to come in there and know how to do it immediately. It's going to be faster. People are looking for that a lot more. If they're like, they come into kind of a mess and chaos, and the owner is literally doing everything. They wear every hat, which is to be expected of any business owner. But to know that there are certain folks that can spread some of those roles, or at least there's a system written out, or a way to do everything. If there's a place for everything and a thing is in its place, that is going to create a much better feeling around a business and make it much more attractive to buyers. Consider crystallizing your values and your culture. Again, I know I keep hammering this, but folks are going to want to know, what is it that makes your business different outside of just what you're producing? What do you care about? What makes your business important? Do you give somewhere? Do you treat your employees well? Do you have some sort of cultural thing that you do within your business where you celebrate, where you go out? I know some businesses, they take off a whole week every year, and they have a party at the beginning. In the middle of summer, it's a 4th of July week, and they take off the whole thing. Things like that. Not that you need that. Business may not be able to afford it, but things like that. People are going to wonder, what makes this special, even just outside the product you're making. I would consider owner financing. For some people, that's kind of we get kind of tight when we think about that. They're like, I just want to be done. And you can have that goal. The reality is, prime rate right now is at 7.5%. And that means most banks are going anywhere from 8.5% all the way up to like 11, 12% for interest rates for lending. So that's going to really eat at your cash flow. And when you're showing buyers that cash flow, buyers are going to have to know that the cash flow is still going to be able to sustain them, and it's not just going all towards interest. And so for the story I'm going to share in a little bit, the owners came around to a younger couple and they undercut the SBA by about 1 whole percentage point, and it saved them a lot of money. And everybody kind of wins. It was right at the beginning when things started getting weird with the stock market. So the sellers, they didn't have a place to put their cash that they felt was secure anyway. And now that the couple gets a solid paycheck every month from a stable business that they know works because they created it. And they're involved with the business. They agreed to come on for training for a year. So it creates the stability, assured paycheck for something that they have to put very little effort into. It's something worth considering. And a lot of times, y'all sellers, and you can ask a lot of brokers this, we will see folks prefer to sell to someone who fits more of their vision of who should buy the business over who's bringing top dollar. Because you guys have spent so much, you've created a legacy. We talked about how you value legacy. And anybody who would spend as much time on a business like you guys have is going to value that legacy. They want to know that in my employees, are they going to be taken care of? I've worked with these people, a few years, 10 years, sometimes 15, 20 years. This person has been in my business, and I want to know that Kendra or Steve is going to be taken care of, that they're not going to hate the new ownership when I decide that I need to retire and get out because I'm exhausted, or I want to spend more time with my grandkids, things like that. Update your tech, automate. For some of us, this will be really easy. Some of us are really tech savvy. Even amongst the baby boomers, there are folks of you out there that do know how to do this stuff. But what's going to make your business more attractive is to know how much automating is needing to be done. How are we going to make things happen like that? Apps that are trendy, that bring things all in one place, they really are helpful if you aren't using them. Try to find ways to incorporate that so that someone who comes in feels less overwhelmed by maybe the 10, 15 legal pads that you have somewhere with all your written out expectations, bills, etc. And then last but not least, you really should scrutinize. Like I've put a lot of like, hey, let's bend towards the seller. And in the same breath, I'm going to tell you, scrutinize your buyers, right? We're having a lot of folks who are considering business ownership for the first time. When I bought, the first business I bought was a small coffee company, right? And the landlords almost killed the deal. Because the older couple that had been running it for the last 10 years, this small cafe in their building, they knew what they were doing. They had come from running a microbrewery in California, had a lot of experience. And here comes, it was me and my sister. We had come from the special education world. We'd come from working in education, and we hadn't had any experience. And their first fear was, and at the time I didn't understand it, like, these kids are going to run this business. They're going to kill what it is, and they're not going to make any rent, and then we're going to be on the hook. And they almost said flat out no, and they had the power to do that per the lease. They were going to keep the old owners on, and the old owners didn't want to do that, and so the deal almost got killed. Because we came in with such little experience. I mean, all I had to my name was a 1990 Honda Accord. That's where I was at that point in life. So understandably, they felt that way. And fortunately, we worked a lot with the owners. They spent a lot of time with us. They gave us some education. But I understand why you would want to scrutinize. And you probably won't be the only ones. Point in case in our situation, we had to work around the landlords. And if you lease a spot and are planning to sell your business, the landlord might look at whoever's coming in. You got to think about them too. All right. And just here's a good quote for food for thought. And basically summarized, it's asking things like, hey, think about your business from the buyer's perspective. Are your employees happy? Is your business acceptably modernized? Do employees know their roles and job descriptions, etc.? All right, we're going to go on to perspective 2. Real quick, if you are a seller who just heard all of that, just don't be intimidated. This is not a make or break for you. This isn't a necessity. Just know, though, that every step you are able to take in this direction will help save you time and help maximize the value of your business. And think about it in small steps. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to cover every base. But let's say if you're at a 4 out of 10 on your business systems, get to a 6 out of 10. If you're working 50 hours a week, get to 40. Try and find a way to bring down your hours, maybe delegate to stuff that you have to staff, or simplify your systems with technology, et cetera, so you can cut back on some of that, make things more attractive. All right, buyers. I don't know how many of y'all are on this, but I'm going to give you a few more stats here. An estimated 500 plus baby boomer businesses will enter the market daily until 2030. That is a staggering amount. Doesn't mean all those businesses will be sold or everyone will be successful, but that is a lot. That is a lot of people retiring. That is going to create a lot of competition for sellers. So buyers, this is turning slowly into a buyer's market. Note that generations are becoming proceedingly smaller. Right now, it's going to be about a 3-to-1 seller to buyer ratio. There's going to be a lot more sellers than there are buyers. And so sellers, another good thing to keep in mind about why you want to keep your business competitive. Buyers, you have some room to negotiate and find things that you like, things that work for you and your household. The way to think about it, if we have the baby boomers as the largest generation, Gen X was a smaller generation, and then millennials was actually a bigger generation than that. So it kind of went big, small, slightly bigger, and then Gen Z is our smallest generation. So it's kind of tapering, and so that's what's to be expected. There's going to be a lot more sellers than there are buyers, even moving forward for decades to come. The current median ask price to cash flow multiple, boomers are currently at a 3.3x. They're charging a lot more. And to be fair, boomer sellers especially have the right to do so. More stable businesses that show a lot more longevity, that do well, have good cash flow, good relationships, good vendors, etc. They're just naturally going to sell better. And so they have a right to price better. But as a buyer, you're going to know that, like, hey, I will probably pay a premium for that. Something that has a lot of experience and longevity. I have to be prepared to try and figure out how to buy that. Again, 95% of businesses are financed. I say that because, and I put that in the buyer section because if there's any buyers on here that are like, I've never bought a business. A lot of folks who have never considered buying a business before, they think it's super unattainable. They think only the rich buy businesses, right? When in reality, it's more like just buying a house. It's you get a mortgage, you get a loan. Buying a house with a mortgage is a very common thing that happens, probably 90% of the time. I don't know the statistic on that personally, but it is a common practice, and it is much case the same scenario with businesses. And then last but not least, 60% of baby boomers report being open to owner financing. I thought the statistic was impressive, just because it backed what I've already said in this webinar so far, and that a lot of you baby boomers, if you were on this call, a lot of you are much more open to seeing out a legacy fulfilled and making sure your business goes to someone who fits your ideal business owner, who's going to take over for you, someone who you feel fits the vision of your business, someone who fits the culture, someone who makes sense. You are more likely going to hedge your bets towards that person than you are top dollar. That doesn't mean you have to do that by any means. If you need your top dollar, go ahead. If someone buys it, they buy it. That being said, the amount of times many brokers have seen someone say, I don't like this guy, even though he's got a better offer. I like this couple. I see them in myself. Let's go with them. That happens quite often. And for buyers on this call, if you are younger, know that. Know that you want to appeal to an older generation in the fact of like, hey, is my business and my people going to be taken care of? And we'll kind of go in that next thing here. All right, so the breakdown of your buyer. Here we go. Things to expect. The market will be competitive. They're most likely going to be younger than you. That's not necessarily a surprise. They are, oh shoot, I realized I didn't move all the way down on this. My bad, guys. Here we go. There we go. Sorry, I got excited. Breakdown. Transition is heading towards a buyer's market. It's still going to be competitive. You have to keep that in mind. Sellers are most likely going to be a baby boomer, also not a surprise. Baby boomers are more likely to be involved in the day-to-day. If you are a buyer, a younger buyer, and you're expecting to go into a business with no sort of work in hand, with just being like, this is going to print me money, I just have to do a few things and I can let it sit and run, that's most likely not going to be the case. You're going to have to go in there, you're going to have to make updates, you're going to have to work to get those automations, work to get that in there, but it will be, the expectation is that it will be work. Businesses may need updating. You're going to go in there and you're probably going to find things that aren't updated. They're not automated. There's a lot of systems that aren't in place. It's kind of helter-skelter. This idea of making business systems has been around for a while, but for businesses around 30, 40 years, there are people who have just done the same thing every day, the same way, and it's all in their head. And so your challenge as a buyer, that if you could agree to come to a deal with a seller, is to how am I going to make this more effective moving forward? How am I going to make sure that I don't have to keep everything in my head, especially if that's not my forte? Older businesses are going to have higher premiums. We talked about that. The legacy premium, as it's called. And again, interest rates are fairly high. Keep that in mind when it comes to financing and how you're going to measure that out. All right, strategies and leverages. How are we going to make ourselves more appealing to an older generation? How are we going to leverage that, etc.? So first one is consider extra costs into cash flow. Things like interest rates, costs, updates, etc. Lease mortgages. This one catches people off guards. If you have someone who's owned the building forever and they're paying literally nothing on it and they're not going to sell that building and you have to move the business, you now have to calculate rent and mortgage into whatever cash flow is coming in. So keep that in mind. Appeal to legacy. Again, be someone that the owner can see in themselves. Leverage experience and training. These folks have been around for a long, long time. They know what they're doing. They have the relationships. Next point, ask for introductions to those business relationships. Lean into the in-person conversations, especially with folks who don't use things like Slack, right? Go out and have a coffee with them, have a phone call, do things that build trust. These things will build trust with older generations. Consider exposure to the industry. Before I bought a coffee shop, the broker that helped me, he's like, hey, before I help you find a coffee shop, I need you to work in a coffee shop for a while. And I was 26, 27, and I just left special education. I had the time. Not everyone has the time to do that. Try to find ways to expose yourself to the industry you're interested in. Consider creative financing. Find ways to go in it with partners. Find ways to do owner financing, fair deals for them that hopefully creates future wealth for you. Expect to work in the business. We talked about that. Always be direct. Just say what you need. Time is valuable, especially to the folks who are trying to retire. So just say what you think. Make it quick. Business is business. And then in the end, if you're younger, don't ghost. Just don't. All right, have a plan to grow. That's my last point here. If you're not growing, you're dying. Classic Tony Robbins quote. Just make sure that if you buy a business, know how it's going to go. You can't just leave things on autopilot all the time. If a business is going to grow, it constantly needs input. That's most businesses. Even if it's just a little and you can get it down low, it's going to need input. All that to say, this is my point where I make a shameless plug. You're at a Front Range Business mergers and acquisitions webinar, so I figure I should make the plug. But I'm not saying that just for us. I'm saying it's because it's practical. Use a broker. That's my plug. It will make your lives easier. Sellers, we market online for you. We market across multiple platforms. Brokers will know how to make your business more sellable. They will create marketing material that creates that and generates that interest level. They will get you accurate information on selling price. They will help you list in a way that will sell. A lot of folks list too much and people are afraid that they're going to go ahead and cut their own prices, and then you're like, dang, I wish I could have sold that for more. Brokers, especially reputable ones, will help you, and they'll do it fairly. Buyers, this helps you too. Most of the time, brokers have to do with sellers, but know that if a business is being listed by a broker, it's probably already been vetted. It means that a broker, especially a reputable one, is going to say, hey, this passed the test. This is helpful. This business makes money. There's structures in place. A lot of brokers know the writing on the wall when a business is not sellable. They just do. And so if you're a buyer, know that if it's listed and it's under a broker, working with that broker is going to help you. Not to say there's not your cheesy car salesman out there that will, they're out there, they're for sure out there, but a lot of brokers are very reputable. They're have a lot of integrity, and they're going to price it fairly, and you know that they've already vetted things. So take that for what you will. Real quick, because I know we are short on time here. This next part is about the workforce, and kind of what I'm going to walk you through is I'll kind of do some brief points, and if we can need stuff in the Q&A, or if you have questions after, feel free to reach out to us. Essentially, the quote and the things I like about considering the workforce is that the staff that you are inheriting or going with the business that you are selling are really going to set people up for success or make your business very attractive. If everything's locked up in one key employee, especially everything that you do, and that person leaves or that person decides to leave because you're selling, these are things you have to consider. The quote I like here is, success is a story about you, where succession is a story about everyone involved. Just be aware of your staff sellers. Know what they're expecting when you leave. Know what's going to take care of them, especially if you care. A lot of you guys really care about your staff, and you know what's going to be good for them. Write it out. Write out what you think, what your ideal buyer is, not just for the business, but for your staff. Keep that in mind. There are more stats. 1 in 5 businesses have employees. Nearly all businesses are listed on brokerage platforms. 34% of employees leave post-acquisition within 1 year. So that's important to note. Buyers, how are you going to keep these people around? And then that number goes up for management. 40% of management transitions within 1 year after that. So considering your generational makeup is going to help you mitigate the risk of a shakeup post-purchase. Questions you can ask yourself: how systemized is the business I'm buying? Does the business I'm buying lean heavily on a key employee or a demographic like college students? Is your town full of young college students, and how dependable are they? Are they going to leave, or are they folks where you don't have college students and you're like, gosh, this one young person who's the barista at my shop, if they leave, is a 60-year-old coming in to now be a barista, the most useful thing? Is that who's going to want to work there, essentially? What is the generational makeup of my staff, and what's motivating them to stay at the business? Things you want to know going in. Things with older folks: how do you build these relationships with these key employees and demographics? Older employees, if they're older, they've probably been there for a long time. They probably have a lot of the relationships. I've had a business that I sold. There was one key guy. He was an older guy. Unfortunately, he wanted to stay there for 3 years, but he had everything. This guy was the business outside of the owner. Once the owner left, he didn't have to train because this other guy had been there forever and knew everything, and he trained. Unfortunately, he was very generous. He was very loyal. All the things we love about the baby boomers. If you come in, don't throw too many changes at them. Sit down with them a lot. Have in-person conversation. Ask them about their experiences. Invite them into what you're doing. With younger folks, communicate regularly. Remember, the younger generations love immediate feedback over and over. Tell me, is this right? Am I doing this right? Find ways. You can never over-communicate with younger generations. Be super transparent. Authenticity, I like to say, is the new trump card in relationship. People want to know your motivations, or they'll question you, right? Everyone has a reason to think that any business owner is part of the evil empire. And so tell them what your motivations are. Tell them what you're trying to do. Be very transparent about where you're going and what you're hoping to do. Build structure where is needed. Everyone loves more structure, especially the younger generations. What do I do? Why am I doing it? How is it done? Etc. All right, real quick strategy. I haven't personally used this, but I hear it is an upcoming trend, especially within larger organizations. 100-day culture message. If you buy a business, come in, say, hey, this is who I am, where I want to go, how you fit in, how I think we can work together and create an awesome business experience over the next 100 days. And the 100-day timeline is kind of the breakdown of that. Gives people a good feeling of what's happening in their life and where they're going. People want to know, this thing that I've dedicated myself to, is it going to be a place that is going to be good for me? All right, story time, Q&A. I'm going to tell a quick story. Feel free to start typing things out in the Q&A as I go through my story, and then we'll get to questions, and then hopefully we can honor your time as best as possible. If you need to leave, go ahead and do that. Thanks for coming today. Here's my story. Recently, sold a small manufacturing business. It was an older couple, and I like this story because it fits a lot. They were your typical baby boomer older couple. They had been in this business since the late 80s, early 90s. Originally a photography business that morphed into a manufacturing business, and this they had listed with me, and it was I worked with them for about 8 or 9 months. A strategic buyer had come through and wanted to more or less buy them out, and was really great at first. And then as time went on, his expectations changed a lot. He wanted to start doing things, making products that they didn't feel comfortable with their company. And at the end of the day, they couldn't control it, but they're like, this just doesn't feel like the kind of person we want buying the business. And so they asked after a while, we just don't think this is going to work out with this guy. And so they asked if they could move on to someone else. Said sure. And we at that point, we had figured out a way to transition out of that. And not too much longer after, a younger couple had come along, and they were like, hey, I really like this business. I don't know if we can afford it. And I said, let's just talk with them. Why don't we meet? And I know that they're looking for someone that fits a little bit more of their values. Sat down, it was magic. They really liked this younger couple. Some of their values aligned. They both went to church and could share in some things there. The new younger couple wanted to empower the staff that was there. They didn't want to make any big changes. They wanted to grow the business. They had a lot of energy. And ultimately, this older couple, they wanted a legacy. They wanted to be able to see themselves in the people who were buying it. And so they met him at a much lower price and owner financed the whole thing, because at the end of the day, they just wanted to know that their business was going to be taken care of and their staff was taken care of. And they're going to get a better deal out of it with the interest and the loan that they got, because that was pretty close to the issue, than they did for the ultimate selling price that they were going for. It's just going to take time. And especially with kind of, they bought it right around the time the stock market started going funny. And so they're like, where are we going to put our money anyway? And they feel really good about it. They really like the younger couple. They're still in communication. And it's worked out really great. It's this, the older couple, they offered a lot of themselves to this younger couple. They hired younger staff. They had a very organized business, all these things that made it really attractive to the younger one. That was before. There wasn't anything they had to be told, but these were things that worked. It made it attractive to the younger couple coming into this place. As for the younger couple, they saw this older couple and they became friends. And ultimately, they wanted the older couple to know, like, hey, we want to take care of this business for you. They appealed to their legacy, right? They leveraged that idea and feeling, and not manipulative, but in a sense of like, hey, they want to see someone, they've built this thing. We want to honor that. And so I'm getting distracted by little blips, I apologize. We want to make sure that the staff are taken care of. We don't want to see anybody leave. It was a really great thing. Things that end up being problematic, and sellers, you can take some things for this. The staff had no roles, and so that was a little bit of a problem. Just because right now I know that couple is trying to really sort out everything. They're trying to sort out like who does what. They have people standing around sometimes because everybody's kind of doing the same thing. And when there's not enough work for everybody to do the same thing, they're overpaying folks. And so that really, the old owner had done that because he was burnt out, and he said, just, if you throw enough at the wall, it's going to stick. That was kind of the mentality. And then there's a lot of old systems. Guy was very intelligent. He made this whole computer program that ran everything from his books to the clock in to the inventory. He made a whole computer program for this, and he's not stopped using it since 2004. That to say, everything is locked up in that one computer program, and it has to be transitioned. It's going to be a pain to do it. So updating your systems, making things automated, and making sure that staff have roles and clear organization, these things are going to help you in the long run. That was my quick story. I know I'm keeping you guys a little bit over. Let's go ahead, and I think some of the Q&As are being answered here. I'm going to open mine on up. Sorry, it's still loading, guys.
Justin, we did have a couple of questions, but the last question would probably require a little bit more insight around seller financing. That's such a wide topic of conversation. I feel like we should just schedule a call with Lane to discuss it, because there is no typical when it comes to those types of things. We can kind of talk through some structural things later on another call, but I think we can conclude the webinar here. And
yeah, sure.
Great job, and I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time and participation. I'll let you wrap up, Justin.
Got it. Hey, yeah. Thanks for hopping on today, guys. I think especially this transaction that I told during story time was a big catalyst for me getting a real insight into this generational differences and doing the research that I've done and understanding it more, especially as more deals come across the table where we have younger buyers, older sellers specifically. A lot of interesting things. I hope that the sellers here got some stuff out of it, and hopefully can take some of it to glean from and sail off into retirement. You guys worked hard. So thanks for coming on today. Appreciate y'all, and have a great day.